Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Wanda Maximoff stood at the edge of a crumbling rooftop, eyes closed as the world below moved in blurred motion. The energy around her hands swirled, faint red tendrils of chaos magic curling and unspooling like threads tugged from the very fabric of reality. She took a breath, focusing, feeling the pulse of the city beneath her. A heartbeat, a hum of countless lives moving in their individual rhythm. Control, she whispered to herself, eyes still closed. I am in control. But the truth was, chaos magic didn't take care much for control. It was wild, unbridled, and the more she tried to contain it, the more it threatened to slip through her grasp like sand through her fingers. With a sudden surge of energy, she thrust her hands outward. The red magic exploded from her fingertips, a ripple that seemed to momentarily still the air. For a second, everything was in balance, and Wanda allowed herself a small smile. Then she felt it, the pushback, the chaos she tried so hard to harness turned on her like an untamed beast. Her smile faltered as the energy grew hotter, fiercer, spiraling out beyond her control. It lashed outward, wild and untethered, reaching further than she intended. No, she muttered, trying to pull the magic back. But it was too late. Somewhere on the other side of the city, a flash of red light rippled through the streets, unseen by most, unnoticed, except by one particular mercenary on a rather routine job. Deadpool, Wade Wilson, to his mother, was in the middle of a fight. Correction, in the middle of winning a fight, he parried a swing from a street thug, his crowbar, with the effortless grace of a man who had watched too many martial arts movies, then swung back with his katana, slicing the weapon in half. The thug blinked, wide-eyed and bewildered, as Wade delivered a swift kick to his midsection, sending him crashing into a nearby trash can. See, this is why you always go for the katanas, Deadpool said, shaking his head. Way more elegant, classy even now. As much fun as this has been, let's wrap it up. I've also got a chimichanga waiting for me that's not going to eat itself. Before the thug could respond, Deadpool, his eyes widened beneath the mask as he felt a jolt of energy course through him, like an electric shock. But this was different, deeper. The chaos magic Wanda had unwittingly unleashed slammed into Deadpool like a truck, and for a moment time seemed to stretch and warp. Deadpool staggered back, clutching his head. Whoa, what the hell was that? Did someone spike my brain? The thug scrambled away in the confusion, but Deadpool hardly noticed. His mind was spinning, swirling, and then like a glass shattering into 1,000 pieces, he felt something inside him split. One moment he was Wade Wilson, and the next he wasn't. The cityscape around him blurred, and in his head, voices, different versions of his own voice, rose like a cacophony. His thoughts fractured, his psyche splintered, and suddenly he was no longer one Deadpool. He was many. In the center of the city, Wanda's heart raced as she scanned the skyline, her mind whirling with panic. She had felt the magic break free from her control, felt it ripple out into the world untamed and dangerous, and she knew, deep down, something had gone wrong. The sound of distant sirens caught her attention, but it wasn't torn until she saw the flash of red and black, moving with erratic speed through the streets below that her stomach sank. Deadpool, she whispered, her eyes narrowing. He was out there wreaking havoc. She took a deep breath and leaped from the rooftop, her magic catching her mid-fall and carrying her in a graceful arc through the air. She landed softly in an alley, her boots barely making a sound on the pavement. The city was buzzing with chaos, and she knew exactly where it was coming from. Wanda moved quickly, weaving through the crowded streets as the sound of crashes, screams, and gunfire grew louder. It didn't take long before she found him, or rather in the middle of the street, surrounded by overturned cars and panicked civilians, stood multiple versions of Deadpool, each one acting in a wildly different manner. One Deadpool, larger and more muscular than the others, was smashing a car window with his bare hands, laughing maniacally. Another Deadpool stood nearby, dramatically weeping into his hands, completely oblivious to the chaos around him. A third was dressed like a superhero with a makeshift cape, leaping from one car to another, striking exaggerated poses. Wanda blinked, unsure of what she was seeing. Oh, great, as if one Deadpool wasn't high enough, she muttered. She stepped forward, cautiously, her eyes flicking between the various versions of him. It was clear what had happened. Her magic had splintered his already fragile mind, dividing him into multiple personalities. And now, Each one of them was running wild. Before she could react, the large, angry Deadpool spotted her and let out a guttural roar. "You," he bellowed, pointing a finger at her. "This is all your fault." Wanda barely had time to raise her hand in defense before the hulking Deadpool charged at her, fists swinging wildly. She conjured a shield of red energy just in time to block the blow, but the impact sent her stumbling backward. The force of his attack was surprising, even for Deadpool. This version was stronger, more aggressive. Wanda gritted her teeth, focusing as she pushed back with her magic. She needed to contain the situation before things spiraled even further out of control. "Deadpool, stop!" she called out, but it was clear this version wasn't interested in listening. As the larger Deadpool continued his assault, the superhero Deadpool somersaulted into view, landing with a flourish beside Wanda. "Fear not, citizen. I, Deadpool, shall save you from this menace." Wanda shot him a bewildered look. "You are the menace." But superhero Deadpool was already too busy engaging the angry version of himself, launching into a series of overly dramatic punches and kicks. The two Deadpools clashed, each one determined to outdo the other in sheer absurdity. Meanwhile, the weeping Deadpool continued to sob uncontrollably in the corner, muttering about the meaninglessness of life. Wanda felt a headache coming on. This was worse than she'd have thought. If she didn't find a way to reverse the spell and reunite Deadpool's fractured psyche, the entire city would be destroyed in a matter of hours. Taking a deep breath, she focused her magic once more. There was only one solution: she would have to enter Deadpool's mind and fix this from within. Wanda Maximoff had seen some strange things in her life, but the inside of Deadpool's mind was something else entirely. The moment she cast the spell to enter his psyche, the world around her shifted. Colors warped and twisted, buildings stretched and contorted, and the very air seemed to pulse with chaotic energy. She stood in what could only be described as a surreal landscape, a place where nothing made sense and everything was constantly changing. In the distance, she could see the different versions of Deadpool ruling over their respective domains, each one a reflection of the fractured pieces of his personality. This was going to be a long night. The angry Deadpool's domain was a battlefield, a war-torn wasteland filled with explosions and destruction. Wanda made her way through the wreckage, her magic at the ready. She knew that in order to reunite Deadpool's mind, she would have to confront each version of him and find a way to bring them together. As she stepped into the heart of the battlefield, angry Deadpool appeared, towering over her like a force of nature. His eyes glowed with rage, and his fists were clenched tightly. "You think you can control me?" he roared, his voice shaking the ground beneath them. Wanda didn't flinch. "I am not here to control you. I am here to help." But angry Deadpool wasn't interested in help. He charged at her with all the fury of a wild animal, and Wanda barely had time to react. With a flick of her wrist, she conjured a barrier of red energy blocking his attack. But angry Deadpool was relentless, pounding against the barrier with all his strength. "You're not real," Wanda said calmly, her voice steady. "You read just a part of Deadpool, a part of his anger, his fear." The words seemed to strike a chord. Angry Deadpool hesitated, his fists lowering slightly. But the rage was still there, simmering beneath the surface. "I know what it's like," Wanda continued, her voice softening. "To feel out of control, to let anger consume you. But this isn't true. You are more than this." For a moment, angry Deadpool seemed to falter, his eyes softened, and the rage that had consumed him began to dissipate. Wanda seized the opportunity, reaching out with her magic. With a gentle touch, she began to weave the fractured pieces of his mind back together, slowly pulling angry Deadpool back into the whole. Wanda could feel the tension ease as angry Deadpool began to dissolve, his towering figure shrinking until it faded into a red mist. The battlefield around her flickered, momentarily stabilizing, but she knew there was still much more work to be done. The war-torn landscape gave way to a bleak and empty grayness depressed Deadpool's domain. Here, everything was drenched in muted, lifeless tones. The sky above was a dull, oppressive gray, and the ground beneath her feet felt cold and lifeless. Off in the distance, sitting on a decrepit bench, Wanda saw a depressed Deadpool, hunched over, his face buried in his hand. She approached slowly, her footsteps making no sound on the barren ground. He didn't look up as she stopped beside him, merely muttering to himself, "Tice, what's the point? None of it matters anyway." Wanda sat down next to him, letting the silence stretch between them for a few moments before speaking. "You're wrong. It does matter." Depressed Deadpool lifted his head slightly, his eyes hollow and dull beneath his mask. Does it though? Look around. This place, this wasteland, that's what life is. Isn't it just one big joke that no one's laughing at? Wanda sighed softly, recognizing the depth of his despair. She knew what it felt like to fall into that pit, to feel like nothing was worth the fight. But she also knew that Deadpool, despite his constant sarcasm and dark humor, had always found a reason to keep going. This version of him, this piece of his fractured mind, was simply his doubts magnified. You've always found a reason to keep going, no matter how bad things get. Dear Wanda said, her voice steady. That's why you can't give up now. This isn't who you are. This is just one part of you. And even when things seem hopeless, you always find a way to push through it and to come back. Depressed Deadpool. Did he answer at first, his eyes fixed on the gray horizon? But slowly, Wanda saw something flicker behind them, just a glimmer of recognition, a faint spark of the irrepressible Wade Wilson she knew was buried beneath the gloom. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder, her magic stirring again, threading through the cracks in his broken mind. The air around them shimmered as the cold grayness started to fade, replaced by a warmer, softer glow. Depressed, Deadpool's form blurred, and soon he too dissolved into the mist, his despair easing away. Wanda stood up as the world around her shifted again this time. The landscape transformed into something entirely different, a vibrant, exaggerated version of reality. Bright, flashy colors assaulted her senses, and she found herself standing in the middle of a cartoonishly idealized city. Everything was polished and exaggerated like she had stepped into a comic book. Heroic Deadpool was easy to spot. He stood proudly atop a building, hands on his hips, his makeshift cape flapping dramatically in the wind. His pose was overly theatrical, a parody of every superhero he'd ever idolized. As he declared, spotting Wanda below, "Fear not, citizen, for I, the ever-vigilant Deadpool, shall save you from the evil that lurks in the shadow." Wanda raised an eyebrow, watching as heroic Deadpool leaped down from the building, landing with a flourish in front of her. He pointed at her, striking another exaggerated pose. "You're the one who caused all this, aren't you? But don't you worry, I shall vanquish the chaos and restore order." Deadpool, Wanda started, but heroic Deadpool was already charging at her, throwing wild, over-the-top punches. Wanda sidestepped easily, watching him flail about like a child playing pretend. "This isn't the real you," she said, blocking one of his dramatic swings. You don't need to pretend to be something you're not. You don't need to play the hero you already are." Heroic Deadpool stumbled to a halt, his fist still raised in the air. "Wait, what? You don't need the cape or the posing or the speeches," Wanda continued, her voice calm but firm. "You save people in your own way. You do what needs to be done, even if it's messy, even if no one gives you credit for it. That's also what makes you a hero, Deadpool. You don't need to prove it to anyone." Heroic Deadpool blinked, his cape fluttering in the breeze, Well, when you put it that way. He lowered his fists, the ridiculousness of his previous stance fading as he stood a little straighter. Wanda could see the realization dawn on him, the understanding that being a hero wasn't true about the theatric. Slowly, the oversaturated colors of the cartoonish world began to dim, the exaggerated lines of the buildings and streets softening until they became normal once more. With a flick of her wrist, Wanda reached out with her magic, drawing heroic Deadpool back into the hole. As he dissolved into the familiar mist, she braced herself for the next and final part of the journey. The scene changed again, and this time, Wanda found herself standing before a towering, whimsical castle that looked like it had been plucked straight out of a fairy tale. Oh, I clung to the stone walls, and the air was thick with the scent of roses. The sky above was a soft pink, and everything seemed bathed in a warm, romantic glow. At the entrance to the castle stood romantic Deadpool, dressed in medieval knight's armor, complete with a plumed helmet and a longsword strapped to his side. He grinned at her as she approached, giving her a deep, exaggerated bow. "My lady," he said in a voice that was far too smooth for Deadpool, "I have awaited your arrival. Are you here to be swept off your feet by my charm, my wit, my undeniable handsomeness?" Wanda couldn't help but roll her eyes. "I'm here to fix this mess, Deadpool, not to get caught up in one of your fantasies." Romantic Deadpool placed a hand over his heart, feigning deep offense. "Alas, I am but a humble knight in search of true love, and you, dear Scarlet Witch, are the key to my heart." Wanda gave him a flat look. "You're not serious, are you?" Romantic Deadpool dropped the act for a second, smirking beneath his helmet. Tear? You worth a shot? Wanda crossed her arms. Look, I get it. You want connection. You want love. But you don't need to play the role of some fairy tale knight to get that. You don't need to hide behind this persona. You read already enough as you are. Romantic Deadpool paused, the dramatic flare fading from his posture. His hand slowly lowered from his heart and the exaggerated gleam in his eyes softened. I don't want to be alone, he admitted, his voice quieter, now more genuine. It's stupid, but sometimes I wonder if anyone really gets me. Wanda's expression softened as she stepped closer. You're not alone, Wade. You don't have to pretend to be someone else to be loved. The people who care about you, they see the real you even through all the chaos, and that's enough. Romantic Deadpool stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. Okay, you got me. This whole knight in shining armor bit was starting to chafe anyway. Wanda reached out once more, her magic weaving through the air as Romantic Deadpool, Seth's form, began to dissolve, his castle fading into the mist. She drew him back into the whole, feeling the last pieces of Deadpool as fractured psyche finally come together. As the world around her blurred and shifted, Wanda felt herself being pulled back into reality. When she opened her eyes, she was standing in the middle of the city again, surrounded by the wreckage that had been caused by Deadpool's various personality. In front of her stood Wade Wilson whole again, his mind no longer splintered. He blinked a few times, looking around at the destruction, then down at himself. Wow, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. That was something. Wanda let out her breath. She hadn't realized she'd been holding you. Read back, all of you. Deadpool grinned beneath his mask, his usual irreverence returning. Well, I couldn't leave you hanging, could I? Besides, what's a Deadpool without a little chaos now and then? Wanda gave him a wry smile. Let's try to keep the chaos to a minimum next time. Deadpool shrugs. No promises. Wanda shook her head, but there was a small smile on her lips. Take care of yourself. Wait. As she turned to leave, Deadpool called after her, Hey, Scarlet, next time, how about you let me split your mind? We'll see how you like it. Wanda couldn't help but chuckle as she walked away. She knew there was still so much to learn about controlling her chaos magic, and so much more to master. But for now, at least the city was safe, and Deadpool, well, he was as whole as he was ever going to be.